The House Rugby Chat. Hi, I'm Paul, the guy behind DrivingMaul. We're going to be talking Rugby World Cup, and some more Rugby World Cup because, yes, it has started. And if you're on Twitter, you'll know about it just a little bit because, hey, John, there's been some refereeing controversy.
Really? Really? Who knew?
Oh, dear. So, yes, everyone, welcome. Welcome. Thank you, John O'Connor, for joining me. Some of you have been mentioning over the past few shows, is that the guy who used to be on Radio Sport talking to folks? Yes, it is. It's him. He's back in the rugby world, as it were, out of the wilderness.
No idea. I had a face for radio. Eh?
Oh, no, sir, no. The Silver Fox. Right then, so I hide mine under a hat so no one knows. No one knows what goes on under here. Evening, Andre. Evening, Jack. Great to have people to join us in the live chat. So what I thought we'd do this evening is run through, especially look at pool by pool, have a look at the games, check out the games, what they mean, how things are tracking, and talk about any other hot topics that are along the way. So let's kick off with Pool A then, shall we?
Okay.
Before we get into the where the real controversy lies, but we kicked off with Japan versus Russia, and actually, did you watch the opening ceremony?
I didn't actually, but I've heard good things.
Yes, it wasn't too long, which is always a big good thing, and it was simple. There was none of this when it was in England. Obviously, 4 years ago, we had the earth lifting up and people jumping out and all this kind of things. All they had was a white square with projections on it, and then they put up a tent pole in the middle, and put some sheeting around it to make a Mount Fuji halfway through, and it was kind of like that was nice and simple. It was all good. So I really enjoyed it. In fact, the simplicity of it and the fact it was over pretty quickly. But
well, I think opening ceremonies should be done on the same basis as speeches, especially wedding speeches, and that is take what you're going to do, halve it, and then halve it again.
Yes, that's a very good. But then again, I really enjoyed the Olympic opening ceremony in London, to be honest. But then again, it was Britain. It was all stuff that I could relate to, and so I enjoyed it. Whereas there might be other people who look at it and just go, "Really? Do we need more of this stuff about it was complicated. So, but I enjoyed it because it was just British stuff, and I get British stuff. So, I must admit, if we'd had an hour long of stuff in Japanese, I would have got pretty bored at some point. But Japan versus Russia. Japan, job done, got the try bonus point win, but Russia showed up and were a lot better than we were expecting, I think.
I think there are going to be a few teams that are going to lift their game because remember, the teams that normally have very little time together have had a number of weeks to work on their teamwork. And that's not something that teams like Russia, for instance, normally get, or the island teams. And for instance, you could see the improvement in Tonga between the game against New Zealand and the game against England. So yes, a lot of these teams, we're seeing what a closer indicator of what they could be if the playing field was leveled and they had similar resources and similar time together.
Yeah, and I think also another thing out of this is, look, Russia lost to Jersey Reds. They lost to Connacht. Now, how many of us actually watched those games? Probably very few, if anybody, in all honesty. We just saw the result and went, oh my word, they're in for a hammering. And I think it just goes to show that there's not that, and perhaps, I mean, we'll get on to Wales later as well, but you've already mentioned Tonga's performance, but there have been a number of teams that we've looked at in the opening, in the warm-ups and gone, dear me, they're in trouble. And when they've got here, they've proven not to be. And that, which goes to show that those warm-up games are not a good guide as to what's going to happen.
No, warm-up games are a little bit like kissing your sister. Not really the real thing, right? And
Well, okay.
look, sometimes what you might call necessary, but not the real thing.
Well, okay. I'm not sure what goes on in South Africa, but I'm not sure it's ever necessary. No, okay, but there we go. The yeah, yeah, they're necessary for fitness and for players to get to know each other. But what
That's
we've
right.
seen is that some teams will have been overtraining during the week and arrived tired at those games and so underperforming. Other
Yeah,
ones won't have touched the ball for ages, or they'll be trying a whole bunch of weird combinations in case of injuries.
yeah, that's right. I think the games in the rugby championship were different because there was an actual championship.
Mm,
There was actually a little bit of something at stake there. Not a huge amount, but certainly I think some of the results that you saw, for instance, in the Northern Hemisphere warm-up games, even though they were between traditional foes like Wales and England, or Wales and Ireland, if that had been, if those warm-up games had been part of the Six Nations, I think it would have been very different.
yes, yep, absolutely. So yeah, so it was yeah. The other thing I actually think about Japan was that they got stage fright in the opening half. They yeah, the nerves got to them. It was a yeah,
Yeah.
and hopefully they'll settle down and play better as the tournament goes on. Yeah, Jack says I thought kissing your sister was a draw. It probably is as well. There's all sorts of things we can say is like
Well,
kissing your sister.
Jack, I would just say this: kissing your sister, there's no winner.
Absolutely. The other game in Pool A was Ireland versus Scotland. This one finished 27-3. And yeah, Ireland really have turned up, haven't they?
Mm. I was quite interesting in that, they were 19 odd, 20 odd up very quickly. And I was quite surprised that they didn't actually put Scotland completely to the sword. I don't know if they took their foot off the accelerator. I don't know if, Bundy Aki coming off made a big difference to their back line, or whether or not Scotland's pride stood up, and that was the difference. But yeah, it was quite interesting for me that it only ended at 27.
I think, well, they'll be happy, obviously, that they didn't let the Scots cross the whitewash defensively. And I think there's an element of, and I think we saw it in this game, we'll see it, we'll probably talk about it again in the England game, actually also in the Welsh game, and also in the New Zealand game, South Africa game maybe as well, is that they did enough to win, but they didn't want to show all their cards. Maybe is part of this.
I suppose there's a part of that because they've clearly had more than enough firepower to deal with Scotland, who, by the way, I still really enjoy the way Scotland play. I enjoy their style of play. I enjoy technically their sound. They're just lacking in athletes, just out and out athletes. But I look at them sometimes and I think if teams like South Africa, for instance, were to play rugby the way the Scots play, how good would they be?
Absolutely. That's and let's be honest, the South Africa have got the backs to do that, and we'll get onto them in a bit, I guess. But yeah, Ireland, all they really had to do was front up and feed off Scottish
Yeah.
mistakes. We saw that Ireland can be physical and have a very good defence. What they have on attack, we have no idea because they didn't have to do it. Scotland, though, showed that they can't cope with the big pack. And I guess MJ in the chat says yes. He knew that they were going. He said he knew they were going to struggle because they only put Georgia away in the last 10 minutes in their warm-ups. Well, we've already said that the warm-ups are hard to judge by, but yeah, there is an element of that. That as you say, they don't have the athletes, they don't have the physicality. Once they lost Hamish Watson to injury, and unfortunately he's gone from the entire tournament. They had no go forward, and
as is one of their backup scrum halves is also gone.
Yep, and Ali Price has also gone as well. So injuries are already taking their toll at this tournament. And I mean, Scotland, a side that don't have that depth, and they have no one to replace Hamish Watson in the same style that he plays. Yeah, they are going to be hurt quite severely by these injuries.
Yeah, what's interesting here when we talk about injuries is, are we not only talking about reducing the depth, but what is the impact on the impact from the bench?
Yep.
Because some of these players that are being lost, and I'm thinking, for instance, of Trevor Nyakane, who I haven't heard the latest whether or not he's definitely gone for the tournament. But the ability that, for instance, South Africa have to be able to bring a absolutely world-class murderer's row front row off the bench, that puts the Wallabies to the sword, and that's coming off the bench. That's a huge plus to have, right? So if you're starting to lose some of those impact players, that also has a huge effect on the game.
It does, and the regulations say once you've replaced a player, that's it, they're gone. And as South Africa call up another player, I think Nkonye's gone. Even if he gets fit in time for the playoffs, he's not allowed to come back because he's been replaced.
Just like, this is one of those things where you go, and why?
Well, this is one of those ones where basically they're saying you have to make a choice. You either keep them in the squad as part of the 31 in the same way that someone like Brodie Retallick and say Jack
I'm
Nell
with
has,
you, but
you're
I'm
not
just
allowed
saying,
to go.
Why? Please don't tell me that the IRB don't have enough money. Why is it only 31? Why, if look, I would imagine they don't want to make it possible for countries with huge amounts of money behind them to have a squad of 40, and Fiji has a squad of 23. I get that, I understand that, but why?
So I guess that's
anyway. But so be it.
That's part of it. They've got to choose a number as to what that number is. Now,
but why the player can't recover and return to the squad, I have no idea. But anyway, So be it.
He's gone. As I say, Hamish Watson, Ali Price have also gone as well. So, but where does that leave this pool? Well, obviously that leaves Japan on 5 points, Ireland also on 5 points. I'm just going to quickly, just updating here, and then Samoa haven't played yet. Their opening game is tonight, I think. No. Their opening game is tonight against Russia. So I'll be watching that in about 2 hours' time. And then Russia and Scotland obviously are on 0 points. So that's where we're at. Ollie Brown, what do I miss? Mate, you always turn up late and you always ask, what did you miss? I can't repeat the whole show for you. We're just covering Pool A at the moment. So you got to say it's looking good for Ireland.
You missed us talking about kissing our relations. So
well, yes, a bit of incest as well. That's right. But basically, yeah, I mean, Ireland obviously on track to top the group quite comfortably, and then that last game between Japan and Scotland is looking tasty already, and we sort of big question marks around Samoa. Can they do something? Because we haven't seen them yet. We have to wait and see.
So here's the question. Do you think Japan can beat Scotland?
Not if they are as shell-shocked as they were in the opening game, but I don't think they will be come round 4 or come their 4th game. So yes, absolutely, Japan can beat Scotland, especially if Scotland keep losing players.
Because they both play great styles of rugby. And the thing that Japan does have, it might not have much tall timber in the line-out, barring a sprinkling of South Africans and Islanders. But they do have some athletes in that Japanese team.
Absolutely. So yeah, it's going to be it's going to be interesting. But that is one of the 2 remaining upsets that I think are available. The big possible upset in the opening weekend of Australia Fiji didn't happen, but yeah, Japan Scotland is definitely an upset potentially.
Okay.
Come the last game of the pool stages. So Pool B, we watched this. We watched the. First off, obviously, Italy beat Namibia to get the big game out of the way. The
Let's break it down in intensive diagrammatical concentration with X's and O's and.
Did you watch this game?
Sorry.
Oh, X's and O's. Well, kisses and hugs and stuff. We're going back to the incest, are we?
Yeah, something like that.
Russia to beat Samoa tonight. Yeah, unlikely. Italy beat Namibia. Oh my gosh, I didn't even watch the game. So yes, I was watching my own cup at the time. But yeah, congratulations to Italy. I think Namibia gave them a bit of a game, and then basically ran out of steam and got beaten. So pretty much as expected. Correct?
Pretty much, yes. I mean, I know Italy have been in the Six Nations for how many years now?
Oh, since 2000, so 19 years.
So 19 seasons, right? And I've heard this again and again, including from you, how they had victories prior to that against top nations, against everybody except maybe, I don't know, England or something prior to that. But in 19 seasons, if they have 3 wins, I don't know. Have they got 5 wins in the Six Nations in 19 seasons?
There
we go.
Something like that. About 5.
Yeah, there we go. There's the answer. That after 19 seasons, they've won 5 times, even though they play at home against the other Six Nations. But at least they have international competition at higher level every year. And Namibia don't see high-level competition except every 4 years. So, really, there should be no question that some of these teams, like Namibia, it's vital that they're part of the World Cup because it gives something aspirational for teams around the world to aim at. I think that's vital. But there should be no question who comes out and winner in a game like that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Agreed. Canada, the fifth team here who haven't played yet, they will get their show on the road on Thursday when they face Italy, which will be a pretty meaningless game as far as qualification goes, at least. But the big game now. New Zealand beat South Africa, and you sent me a video of some analysis of the game. So, do you want to take us through that, or where do you want to start with this game?
Well, I think first of all, before we get into the controversial things that are happening at the World Cup around refereeing, first of all, I want to say this: the better team won on Saturday night, without question. The All Blacks are the better team, and when I was actually thinking about this, what it must be like to support a team that is consistently the best, right? I suppose it's a bit like, I don't know, being a supporter of the football team that wins almost always, right? What it must be like to be a fan of the All Blacks and grow up that way, where your team just wins something like ridiculous, like 80% of its games, let alone competitions. It just wins 80% of everything, home and away. They are the better team. And the Springboks have the potential to beat them. But unfortunately, the biggest difference between the two teams is in the coaching. And Rassie Erasmus has done very well. He's turned that team around. But the paucity of ambition that the Springboks have is what makes me want to weep. Because they're outside of their own 22, between their 22 and the All Blacks 22, their sole, well, with one exception that I can think of, their desire was to do box kicks again and again and again and again. And as much as you may be able to say they didn't, some of them were too short and some of them were a little too long and they weren't executed properly, this is not a high percentage scoring opportunity, and there was no variation. One occasion, they put the ball through the hands when they did so, they brought up the open side wing who was covering for the cross kick. And when it got to at outside centre, or centre as they would call it in New Zealand, because there was now space, they put a chip kick over. It didn't get a kind bounce. But the point is, at that, they had Barrett scampering to fill that hole, and they did something different, and they did that once. Otherwise, it was like the Battle of Britain. It was the Luftwaffe, right? Again and again and again. And
not only
to
that,
me,
and they didn't manage to target Reese, which I thought they would have been able to.
Well, you see the target who, did you say?
Sevu Reese.
Sevu Reese. Yeah, and they should have been able to target Richie Mo'unga. But the thing is that the All Blacks shifted Mo'unga out several channels on defense, right? Yeah. They didn't swap him to the back, but they shifted him out several channels on defense. And the Springboks, I mean, this is the highest level of the World Cup. You mean you don't have the ability to put it through the hands to make a run at Richie Mo'unga? I mean,
they didn't respond. That's correct. Yeah.
No, I mean but part of that is because they've got a first centre or second 5, eights, as they would say in New Zealand, who hardly passes the ball ever, right? So to get it past their lender is part of the issue, right? And they're not confident of going left and right with hands. So overall, the All Blacks deserve to win. They're more skillful. They're better coached. Not saying that Russie is bad, but he's not at the level of the coaching staff of New Zealand, who had, and we can talk about that, some interesting nuances and variations, things that they did differently to any other time in the year, which you pointed out very well about them playing off 9. And we can talk about that because I think we deserve to give them some credit, right, for how clever they were, how they varied play, and they come at you in different ways. So the All Blacks are the better team. Having said that, right, there have been a number of highlighted instances of the refereeing being not just poor, but terrible, right? The one that instantly comes to mind is the back of the head, no arms shot that Joe Moody gave to Malcolm Marx, which when you see it, you know that is a red card and a few weeks off for Moody. Not only was it not called up, not only was it by the ref, not only was it not highlighted in the replay and dealt with by the TMO or anybody else, even though it happened right in front of the ref, and Marx sat, and it should have been highlighted because Marx was left on the ground and required assistance and ice on the back of his head, right? And it wasn't even cited by the citing officer. And by the way, South Africa has a long-held position that goes back 15 to 20 years that they do not cite people that foul against them, that go against them with foul play, right? So they don't raise in other players.
Just a point to that, Michael Checker does the same thing. He never will cite opposition. He got upset when Fiji cited one of his players. Now you can't get upset by that. It's part of the process, part of the protocols. Yeah, that's
if you have a policy, it's like if you walk when you nick the ball and get caught behind, that's your own personal view.
Yep.
Right.
Exactly.
You can't then say to somebody else, if the laws don't require them to do it, you can't expect somebody else to follow your own code. I think, I understand why South Africa employed that 15 years ago, because South Africa had a, quite rightly, very poor disciplinary record. They were known for dirty play across a number of not only years but decades. And following some of that, Jake White was the one who brought in a clear line and said, we're going to stop this. And part of that, the way that they treated it, was how they dealt with foul play done to them. Right? 15 years on, I don't think it helps them at all. Right? I don't think that it's helpful in any way, because what we've seen is a tendency of many teams to commit foul play against South Africa, and South Africa never cites them. I don't think it helps them at all, and I don't think it's good for the game. Right? Now, having said that, there are a number of instances.
Well, actually, But before we move on,
in this
I totally agree
bad.
with you. The teams should cite where they see stuff. South Africans and also Australia as well. But yeah,
It does look, and here I just, All Black fans. I noticed some postings, whatever, when some of this stuff was highlighted. Well, what about the neck roll on Xavier by Peter Steptoe? Absolutely. Stop addressing the issue by pointing out somebody else's faults. That's not the point. Absolutely, there was not a very bad neck roll, but there was, by the letter of the law, a neck roll by Peter Steptoe, and there should have been a penalty and possibly a yellow card there. But there was nothing done by the Springboks at all compared to what we saw. So there's definitely a red card there for Moody and a few weeks ban that he should have got, right? There's a head-high obstruction swing around the arm to stop Peter Steptoe tackling the scrum half, right, done by Kieran Reid. That's probably a yellow card. And yes, I thought Makozola Mapimpi should have had a yellow card for his professional foul. There's no question, right? But there were also multiple occasions of where the ref had given a penalty against South Africa for entering the ruck from the side. And then there's a list of occasions where right in front of him, the All Blacks come in to the ruck from the side, right? Completely offside. And there's no penalty, right? So again and again and again and again, we have these instances. Now, I don't believe, as much as the South Africans might jump up and down, and remember, they are hyper alert on these things because South Africans have a history of being diddled by especially French referees. So going all the way back to 2010, maybe.
Kiwis aren't big fans of French referees either, to be fair.
Right. Yeah, but going all the way back to Ramon Poit's yellow carding and eventually sending off Bismarck du Plessis for what turned out to be a perfectly legal tackle, but he refused to go upstairs. A perfectly legal tackle on Dan Carter where the arm hidden from the ref wrapped around Carter from the back and Bismarck du Plessis broke his ribs, but his arm was wrapped around the back and the referee refused to go upstairs even though the Springbok captain, I think it was John Smith at the time, said, please go upstairs. And from behind, you see it's a perfectly legal tackle. So going all the way back to that, and that was, I don't know, 09, 08, or 2010, something like that. There's been this litany, and I think Jerome Garces' record now is in games between the All Blacks and the Springboks. It's 6 wins to the All Blacks, 0 to the Springboks, right? So the All Blacks are a better team. They should win. But the point being, this game was not affected by refereeing. However, the Argentina-France game was absolutely, the result was affected by
yeah, before we go, I'd say, I don't want to spend going forensic detail of all of them, but at the moment, we had 4 games in the opening 2 days, and on Twitter we had a storm about the we had a Twitter storm about the refereeing after every single one of those games. So actually, probably during and after every single one of those games. It's got to the stage now where people will go through and try and identify as much as possible the TV stations now in South Africa and Australia, Fox Sports, I think, were doing it, have jumped onto this bandwagon as it's a way of getting views and clicks.
Of course. But the thing is, Paul, when it comes to, sorry, I interrupted you. Please finish your thought.
It's gone to the extent now where it seems that every single game we have, people are complaining about the refs, and not taking any not yourself here, but on Twitter and a lot of other places, a lot of people just not taking any responsibility not putting any responsibility on their players. They put the entire responsibility on the refs, and that's not why I watch rugby and why I want to talk about rugby. It's for the play, and so, but yes, there were inconsistencies throughout. Yes, it hurts some teams more than others, and yes, there are some areas that referees basically seem to ignore. I mean, offside seems to be one of them. Coming into the ruck as an attacking team and clearing out, you seem to be able to come from the side, but as a defensive team, you're not allowed to.
Yes.
We had some interesting. I thought Luke Pearce had a pretty good game, slowed everything down, talked nicely, made it clear. But we had an interesting interpretations there about what was a legal tackle in the legal contesting the ball in the air, where we've seen other interpretations go the other way of the exact same thing. It's the inconsistencies and the not applying of certain laws that are causing all of this. And I don't know what the answer is really, to be honest.
This is why I made the point, even though my heart is with the Springboks, why I made the point of saying that the better team won on the day.
Yeah,
the team with more skill and the team with a better game plan, better coach, more ambition. Let's be honest, it's better for rugby that the All Blacks won that game, because the style of rugby that the Springboks were employing, no matter how good they could be, that particular game plan is horrible to watch, right? It's not inspiring. It's wonderful defense, but terrible attacking ambition, right? But the issue that we're having here is that, unlike previous years where we've had issues around the interpretation of the laws, like previous years where we've had an issue where the referee missed something, like maybe he missed a knock-on, right? And you could say we're having this situation where we're having line calls that can be identified, that can be seen by the TMO if they are referred, right? That's the question. If there is an intent to get them right, they could be referred. And we're having this issue where they are repeatedly happening in contradiction to what is required of the other team, right? So I'm not saying the referees are biased, but it looks like they are, right? So this is not helping the game. This is not helping engagement by people who are on the periphery and going, should I dip my toes into the water and get really involved in this game? Should I hang sort of nail my colors to the mast of my team? And then they turn this on, especially of the smaller teams. I mean, Fiji, look, I will say this. I am 90% certain that if the tackle that Reece Hodge made on the Fijian open sider had been the other way around, there would not only have been a penalty, it would have been a yellow card, right? He was all that stood between that guy and the try line, and he committed an illegal tackle, which took that player out of the game, and he was the most influential Fijian player, right? So I'm not saying he did it intentionally. I think he was exceptionally, let's call it gun shy, Reece Hodge, because he'd already been run over like a speed bump at least twice, maybe 3 times before that.
Yep.
To his great courage, to his great credit, he was courageous, and he went in there and got absolutely smashed, right? He didn't shy away from the tackle, so good on him for that. I'm not blaming but if it had been the other way around and somebody took out a guy, an Australian, hitting straight for, especially at an early stage of the match before Fiji, Fiji by that stage was starting, we're not just minnows here. But at the early stages of the match, this is Fiji and that's Australia. And the Australian's heading for the try line like that. And the Fijian comes across and hits him no arms and takes him out. He's gone, right? He's gone.
Yeah, and we saw that from when the Argentinian coach was talking after the game, saying we shouldn't be reffed like a small nation. It's like, guys, no,
nobody should be
reffed like a small nation. We should all be reffed equally. Yeah,
exactly, right. It's they used to talk about the Jordan rules, right? Michael Jordan, never traveled with the ball when he was dribbling. Michael Jordan never pushed off on an opponent to get the game-winning shot. Well, of course he did, right? But things were like, because he's Jordan. This is the issue that we have, that this is terrible for the game. And you see it again and again. And again. I'm confident that if the roles were reversed, the Fijian player would have been yellow carded, right?
Yes.
I'm fairly confident as well that if a Springbok player had hit an All Black player in the back of the head like this, to the back of the head and the neck, he would have been gone, right? But there just seems to be a thought pattern that can't be happening, right? That's not the case. There doesn't seem to be a thought pattern that the top teams, like for instance, there were multiple occasions where the Springboks monstered the All Black scrum, no penalty, because it almost seems to be like a subconscious thought: the All Black scrum can't be monstered, right? There was, in that video that I showed you, there were multiple occasions, and we saw them at the time where the All Black prop dropped his bind and had his knee had his elbow on the ground. And then one of them, Peter Steph du Toit, on the flank, is calling the touch judge and pointing at the elbow on the ground and saying, look, he's like leaning down on the outside and looking sideways like this and going, look, multiple occasions. No, right? So this is the problem, is there's a perception issue.
Mm-hmm.
So the perception is there is a bias, and that's not healthy. I don't think there's a bias. It might be subconscious where they can't conceptualize somebody like a team like England playing a lesser team really being put on the pump or something. But whatever happens, if it's not biased, there's a lot of incompetence out there, because these issues are not small. They are simple lines. I mean, if you've got the touch judge is supposed to be, or the assistant referee should be able to say that's offside.
Yeah, and so at the moment, what the situation is basically is that the referee has final say, and he's the law on the pitch. What we possibly need to be getting to, and whether it's done official kind of this blatantly, or whether it's done as sort of just guidelines, things like, right, TMOs, you're in charge of offside line. Referee, if they call offside, you have to blow it, rather than it being an advisory to you. No, they're in the right position to do it. They call offsides. You just concentrate on the ruck or other things, and things like that, and also how the TMO goes. But before we end up with having the whole show about refs, I guess the other things we need here is that we get we get clips by whoever's deciding to find them on YouTube. The referees do have a full review of each game. These are the people that are that are the best referees in the world. By definition, that's why they're here. So everyone who's saying, like, all these guys should never ref again, well, whoever comes in, folks, is going to be worse than they are. So be careful what you wish for.
Exactly. But the thing that worries me, Paul, is that Jerome Garces is refereeing every week.
Oh, yeah.
He's refereeing in the French competition every week. What's he doing there? Right? Some of these other refereeing decisions that we've seen that have been iffy, these referees are refereeing in that competition. What is that fostering in that competition? Right? We expect international players to be able to catch a ball, to blah, 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 blah. And yes, refereeing is very difficult. It is. I've refereed at schoolboy level, and I know that it's difficult. Let me tell you, it's not easy, to be making those decisions all the time. But these are supposed to be the best in the world. And again, this is not the same situation that we've seen in previous. I mean, there's always been referee issues, or the referees, but these are not those sort of nuanced judgment calls around subjective laws, or something that happened over here and he missed it. These are repeated line calls or situations where they're applying different standards, and that's what's causing the problem. Let's move on.
Yep. So basically, the way this is now set up is, let's be honest, New Zealand will top the group and South Africa will come second, because they will both win all the rest of their games.
Yes.
It's as simple as that.
Yes.
The only matter of interest is if Canada beat Italy in a couple of days' time, which is very unlikely, then could they come third? But most likely is that Italy will come third and get automatic qualification for the next Rugby World Cup. At the end of the day, Pool B is now decided, really.
Let me ask you this question. If Canada beat Italy and Canada qualify automatically for the next World Cup, and Georgia qualify automatically for the next World Cup by coming third.
Okay.
Does that strengthen Georgia's push to be included in the Six Nations?
Well, it would do, yes. Whenever this comes up, I cite one thing, which is basically that Georgia have never beaten a Tier 1 nation. Once they beat a Tier 1 nation, then I think that strengthens their case, and we can start the discussion.
But look, just rewind for a second.
Yep.
Italy, that's the story. Italy beat a Tier 1 nation, blah, 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 blah. Italy beat a Tier 1 nation in either the amateur era or in the very early days of professional rugby, because rugby only turned professional in '96, and they came into the Six Nations in 2000. So they either got their victories during amateur days, and or they got it in the early days of professionalism. And the longer rugby is professional, the bigger the distance gets between professional teams and amateur teams, which these teams are, right? So you'll be careful. There's now such a huge distance between somebody like England and somebody like Georgia because of the level of money that's available that wasn't around before. But anyway, I know this is our current bone of contention, but you say it will strengthen their case.
Oh, absolutely. Of course it would do, yes. It would be the first time a Six Nations or a Rugby Championship team has not had automatic qualification for Rugby World Cup. So they would have to come up with some way of figuring out how Italy would even qualify if that happened. They'd have to change qualification rules, basically.
Interesting.
So, now, World Rugby does have a form on this. As soon as none of the Pacific Island sides automatically qualified, because Japan and Georgia did, and Fiji, Tonga, and Samoa, none of them did, they immediately changed qualifications to make it so that it was possible for them all to qualify. The way the qualification was done for 2015, one of the Pacific Island nations would not have turned up this time. So yes, they would alter the qualification. Quite how, I don't know, but it would be altered.
Well, let us not be surprised at this, because the way that they voted en bloc for France to get the 2029 World Cup, even though their own review committee recommended South Africa, but the entire Six Nations group voted en masse to.
It was the Tier 2 nations, because France offered more money to World Rugby, and Tier 2 nations were like, well, if we are going to get more money, we're going to vote for them. And France offered more money.
Just by the way, just watch Scotland, England, Italy, and Ireland. All of those nations, they'll all get a game. They'll all have a gate. They're all behind the back channels. They'll all get a game.
You've got to remember that Ireland was also standing. So some of the Six Nations countries were voting for Ireland to get it.
Anyway, just watch.
Anyway, yep.
Just don't be surprised if you find. But the point being here is that the decisions are not necessarily being made in the best interest of the game, right?
Oh, absolutely. We know. Yes, we're aware of that.
And I apply this also to the southern nations. Often don't make the best interest decisions, best interest of the game. Increasing Super Rugby to its unwieldy size that they did some time ago is one of those. Not bringing Argentina into the Rugby Championships after they came third in 2007 in the entire world, and then no, they're not strong enough, right? And so you lost that whole golden generation of players. Basically, was lost. So be that as it may, they're not the only ones, but we're dealing with some of the bugbears of the game that are beyond just a World Cup issue.
Yep. So Pool C, we'll get on to now. Who's in Pool C? Oh, that's right. We had, first off, France versus Argentina, which saw the best and the worst of France in 80 minutes. Where that French team came from. Sorry?
and the worst of the refereeing, in that there is a direct impact on the outcome, right? So the French in the first half were a sight to behold.
Oh, yes.
And truly, that, to watch them play that way, you go, allez le bleu. That's just what you want to see. Rugby played in that way.
We've not
just
seen
with
them play like that
joy.
for a decade.
It was fantastic. Credit to Argentina and the years that they've spent in the Rugby Championship and the years that the Jaguares have been in Super Rugby showed up, because they didn't wilt, they didn't go into their shells, and they came back tremendously well in the second half. And they showed that sort of resilience that you need to have in order to be a top nation. And probably it could be argued that a draw would have been fair, because the second half certainly belonged to Argentina. But so far as the decisions that were taken, they were completely scuppered by the ref when it comes to the final line decisions in the last 10 minutes.
We heard the head coach come out and tell us all about and complain about it in the post-match interviews. I've not heard of him being reprimanded for that.
That's the question I was wanted to ask. Have you heard anything more about that? Because I thought he's going to pay some money.
No, so far I've not heard anything else from that. And the and the amount of emotion that's around that those guys have at that point, to throw them in front of the cameras and microphones, it's unsurprising something came out under, because this, let's be honest, it now means that Argentina's chances of making the quarterfinals are extremely slim. This was pretty much a playoff. This was very nearly a knockout game. So
I think they can. I think they can. But everything has to align. I think they can beat England, but even that doesn't guarantee them a win, because other results have to go their way as well, right?
Yep.
If England, but I think they can. It's got to be a belief issue that they can, right? Because their scrum was vastly improved with the addition of
Figalo.
Bigelow. There we go. Bigelow. Today. I love that anthem, that Argentine anthem. It's my favorite. So, yeah, I think they can do it. But certainly what was done to them, was terrible. It was absolutely terrible.
And it was too.
Can I just say something about the Fiji-Australia game? I was very impressed with how Fiji have improved in their structure.
No. We're not on to Pool D yet.
Oh, sorry, we're not there yet. Sorry. Next, getting ahead of myself. But Argentina,
England, Tonga is next.
Dark horses, and they nearly proved me right. But they were just a little lethargic in the first half, and they paid for it.
Yep. And France were a shadow of themselves in the second half. As well. They didn't play anything like they did in that first half. So then we had England, Tonga.
Fitness is an issue for France.
Absolutely. Which is a shame, but they don't focus on conditioning or cardio conditioning in the French top 14. It's a slower game. It's a more power orientated game, and so the step up to international, the cardio is so much higher that they're not used to it. It's not their style of play. England, Tonga.
By the way, Fiku.
Oh yes. In the first half, he was fantastic, as was Nakarawa. And somehow they survived with only one lock. Because remember,
only the French.
Oh yes, and we had a drop goal. We actually had a couple of drop goals this weekend, which was nice to see. But yeah, so England versus Tonga. Tonga looked.
Follow me. My word.
Sorry.
Edit. spoken like an Englishman. We had a couple of top goals. Oh,
Brilliant.
So excited. Oh.
Again, it's about variety. Variety is the spice of life. So if we had drop goals in every game, they'd get a bit boring. But when you get them as one-offs, they're brilliant. The England versus Tonga. Tonga looked good while they were structured early on, but they couldn't break down the English defence. And England, just beat them up and just powered their way to victory. But you got to say that hit on Billy Vunipola was special.
Maybe you can post a link under this to that hit, as well as to that, albeit a very green-eyed, tinged person who did that thing on the refereeing. Maybe you can add it to the bottom.
Maybe okay. I'll put a link in the notes after the show to both of those. But yeah, that was a fantastic hit. But England did enough to beat Tonga, and New Zealand had a similar result against Tonga in 2011, didn't they? I can't remember the 2011 results, but yes, Tonga was in their group and they did beat them. Basically England did enough, but again, I'm pretty sure that they were keeping a whole bunch of stuff in their locker and not wanting to show their hand attackingly too much. But Billy Vunipola and Manu Tuolangi, clearly two very key players. It was interesting to see when Elliot Daly overran Henry Slade and Henry Slade passed behind Daly into touch, that they had a bit of an argument after that, which was interesting to see, because you don't normally see players tell other players off quite so vocally and loud on the pitch, that actually you can hear it on the through the camera mics saying that Daly was in the wrong place. But yes, and as you say, step up from when, as I said earlier, step up from when they played New Zealand a couple of weeks ago. So England in prime position. It's going to obviously come down to their games against France and Argentina towards the end of it. And who hasn't played in their pool yet? That's the green one, which means the USA. So yes, England USA on Thursday is the next one. Okay, you want to talk about Australia and Fiji? Pool D.
Fiji made an error on receipt of the opening kickoff. Were right as a result, were under huge pressure right on their line. Drove the ball up through a number of phases to create space for a good clearing kick. The ball was then in play for a huge number of phases after that. They didn't kick directly into touch, and they wound up deep inside the Australian half after about two and a half minutes of play. And I thought to myself, this is a completely different Fijian team. And huge credit should go to the coaching staff, because they brought in discipline without stifling the Fijian creativity. The loss of their open side flank, who was absolutely wreaking havoc on the Australians, to that suspect tackle that we spoke about by Reece Hodge, a no-arms tackle. Carding Hodge and sending him off for 10 minutes is not going to restore their player. I'm just pointing out that had a huge effect on the team. But like my good friend in Hawaii, the Hawaiian pastor is a man from Fiji who has Fiji rugby running through his blood. As he says, the issue with the island teams is the final 30 minutes. And that's where the resources and the time and the cushioning and the diet and all of that work really comes to play. But yet, Fiji, you saw a glimpse of what they could be. They beat France in November last year, and that Fijian team has the ability to beat that French team. That Australian team. They absolutely could. If they had the same amount of time, if they were playing regularly together like the Australians were. I know these are big ifs, but that Fijian team has got serious athletes. And not only are they athletic, but they know how to play rugby. They know when to attack. They know how to defend. They've got structure. They've got discipline, and they've got brilliant flair. The one downside that they have, unfortunately, is their fly half. and although Volo Volo is quite popular, it just takes too long to kick. It's this long, slow, languid clearing of the ball. You've got to get his kick off quicker.
Yep.
He really does. It's just too slow at international level when it comes to clearing the ball or making his decisions. He just takes too long. If they had a bit more incisiveness there at 10, and maybe they bite the bullet and they bring somebody in from the sevens and trust them to be a playmaker, and they had more time. I know these are all ifs. That team at 15's level could be a serious world power in rugby.
Absolutely, and until they lost Yato, they were also getting good turnovers at the breakdown, which you when you're up against Hooper and Pocock, you're thinking, well, you think Australia's going to dominate the breakdown, but no, they didn't. You say serious athletes playing very well, but not with the depth to replace players when you lose somebody like that to injury. In this case, a head injury. So yes, it was that. Fiji looked a bit pedestrian.
Because
I disagree with that.
The A team was playing in yellow against them.
But yes, so they didn't have the depth, and Fiji A beat Fiji B to go top of the group. I think it was. The other game here was Wales versus Georgia. And Wales, pretty much like Ireland actually, Wales just did what they needed to do. They played, they figured out Georgia have a real problem between 9 and 10 defensively, and they ran through that early on, got themselves a big lead, and decided not to do anything extra than that and keep all their powder dry.
But the Georgian scrum.
Well, yes. Georgia-Uruguay is going to be a tough game. It's not going to be very expansive. It's not going to be very flowing, but boy, it's going to be two big packs clashing. It's going to crash. And I think we'll see Georgia's team being better, but yes. Now, Georgia basically are a very professional scrum with a decent couple of halves and a whole bunch of amateur backs.
Yeah, there we go. You've hit the nail on the head.
Yep.
I'd love to see that Georgian pack with a Fijian backline. My word.
How about that Georgian pack just with the Fijian pack as the backline?
There we go. You've hit the nail on the head. That's what they need. They're probably those Fijian props would probably be better wingers than the Georgian wingers.
Well, yes, and that's and you saw Georgia making breaks in that second half at times, and every time the person making a break is a forward, and look, they've just not got the pace to finish things off or to really nail a clean break, and that was the that was a problem. So Wales, Australia are on track to meet and decide who comes first and second at the moment. Fiji, Georgia are on track to meet and probably decide who is third in getting the automatic qualification out of this one. And feel sorry for Uruguay.
Good on them making it at least.
Well, not just making it by beating Canada and not having to go to repechage like Canada had to. So yeah, Uruguay are a team on the up. They've just got a lot of up to go. So just quickly, I've done my week 2 predictions are out there on DrivingMaul.com. But we've got Russia Samoa in just over an hour's time. Then we've got Fiji, Uruguay, and tomorrow, and Italy, Canada on Thursday, along with England and USA. By Thursday, we'll eventually have had all the teams will have played, because currently there are still 4 teams that haven't played. And I'm sorry, folks, I don't know what you're going to do with your Fridays, because there is no game on Friday. But there is my 10 Cup. So join the hipster crowd enjoy Mighty 10 and watch the Mighty 10 Cup on Friday.
Yes. What do we do? World Cup. There we go.
And then we're into another weekend of 3 games on Saturday, a couple of games on Sunday. So enjoy that. The games you're going to want to watch that jump out are Japan versus Ireland on the Saturday, and Australia versus Wales on the Sunday. Those are the 2 key games over the weekend.
Now, if things go according to what we expect,
yep,
the team that tops the group that Australia and Wales are in, right?
Yep.
So let's say the winner of that game, let's say they come top.
Yep.
Who is their projected quarterfinal opponent?
So currently France.
And the loser of that game, who is their projected quarterfinal opponent?
England, currently. Yep.
Yeah. I mean, as we know, the French could be way better than the English. Just depends on, what side of the bed they get out on. But it does seem on the surface to be a huge difference in who you have to defeat to get to the semi-finals. So that's a huge.
It is, but if you come up against and if you defeat England, you're projected to face New Zealand. Whereas if you defeat France, you're projected to face either Ireland or Africa.
Yeah, it has to be a much to the finals. Yeah,
absolutely. The so MJ reckons Australia to beat Wales. Well, I've gone for Wales to beat Australia. How are you seeing that one, John? That's probably the biggest one that's come up.
I think the biggest problem that Wales have in beating Australia is the terrible record that they've had in the last 5 or 6 years against Australia.
Decade.
What's in the last decade, and where at times, let's be frank here. The last time Wales have beaten New Zealand once, and that was 60 years ago. So we're not talking about that kind of thing. We're talking about a situation where Wales seems a number of times to have snatched defeat from the jaws of victory against Australia, where really they should have won. And that can seep into the psyche of a team where you don't expect to win. And when I say expect, I'm not talking about arrogance. I'm talking about confidence. And then when you play any game and you're playing with a sense of fear of failure, that can affect performance. So that's my major concern for Wales, because really Australia do not have much of a pack. Hooper and Pocock are really good, but they don't really have a tight 5. And they should be scrummed into the ground, mauled into the ground, smashed, and somebody who has the patience to play them that way, like England would, they shouldn't be a problem. As long as you're not trying to trade blows with them in the back line, and you're starving them of ball, and you're prepared to do that and play like that. And that's how I would recommend. I wouldn't recommend kicking on lots of up and unders and kicking on Australia, unless there's acres of grass that you can aim at. I would recommend between your own 10-meter line, if Wales, between their 10-meter line and the Australian try line, just keep the ball. Just smash it up. Just one-off runners again and again and again, and pick and go and maul them and maul them and maul them. And, of course, always running straight at Pocock, right? Just run at Pocock, continue, get them on the ground, do it again and again and again. And they will fold because they just don't have the forwards. So I agree with you about Wales should win. The question is, do they have the belief?
Yes, I mean, some comments in the chat today. Gatland's worked out how to beat Southern Hemisphere teams by Prac 2, and yes, he has with the Lions. But with Wales, he struggled against Australia.
Yes.
So it's slightly different. Listen to a podcast with, I've gone blank. There was an interview with, the ex-Welsh captain who did the tip tackle in 2015.
I heard him. I heard that interview. The
Warburton.
It's going to come to me. The one with what's his name?
Warburton.
Warburton. The one, he's got the most Roman profile I've ever seen in my life. If you want absolute proof that the Roman Empire conquered the British Isles, you just need to see Warburton in profile. It's incredible, right? But yes, are you talking about that interview that he did with Radio Sport, New Zealand Radio Sport?
No, I'm talking about he did a podcast interview with the Attacking Scrum, which is a Welsh podcast.
Yes.
But he talks in there about captaining and about the difference between the Lions and Wales. And the fact that in the Lions, you have 23 players who are the absolute best. They know they can beat anybody because they are the most competitive beasts that there is. Whereas with Wales, there's 7 or 8 of them that are like that. There isn't a full 23. And that's kind of the difference. And that's why.
Could you ask to post a link to that in the discussion after this, after we finish?
Yep, I'll put a link in the first comment, in the pinned comment down below.
That's
on
awesome.
YouTube.
And I would recommend to those of you who are watching to also have a look at the clips. Again, I know that it's a biased and it's a South African supporter, but the issues that we're talking about, decision making and how poor they are, and it's not good for rugby. Just say it's not good for rugby that a hit to the back of the head with a shoulder goes unchecked. Right? This is the kind of thing that mothers see and they go, "I don't want my son playing." Right? So this is not good for rugby. But I would myself love to hear Warburton's interview, because I heard him interviewed remotely by New Zealand Radio Sport, and he was tremendous. He was tremendous for a 31-year-old. I heard him speak. I thought I really got an understanding of why he was made captain all the way through his career.
And
Tremendous.
On Radio Sport, it's going to be like a 5-10 minute interview at most.
No, it was an extended. It was an extended one with Martin Devlin, longer than normal. So he went through multiple ad breaks, and I was very impressed with him. His ability to speak, no umming, no ahhing, he was amazing. There's a couple of cricket captains that talk.
I mean, like me, I do that.
He was tremendous.
Yeah, so it's about a 40-minute interview. As I'll put the link in the comments below.
Okay.
Thank you very much for joining me, John. In an hour's time, we have the next Rugby World Cup game, and for everyone who needs counselling on Friday because there's no rugby, just drop me a tweet. And
I thought you were going to say anybody needs counselling about the refereeing. There's a helpline going to appear below.
No, anyone who needs counselling about the refereeing, just go on Twitter. You'll find plenty of people who share, and will happily discuss your view. I won't be one of them. So thank you, John, for joining us. Thank you everyone who's been in the live chat. It's been fantastic to have you there. I'll be back tomorrow night with the All Blacks edition over on the other channel, and obviously we'll be back next Tuesday with this #Rugby chat. And I'll try and nab John for perhaps some post-match reaction to South Africa and Namibia at the weekend. That we'll see. Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Cheers.